I'm not sure where to start. This experience has left me rattled. It's broken my psyche permanently to the point where I'm just an empty husk of my former self, trying to live with the reality I have discovered because of this machine. Perhaps we dug in too far, into a place where humanity was never meant to go. Our minds are weak, products of a fraction of a second of evolution when contrasted with the age of the entire universe. We think we're the center of this universe, when really we're irrelevant to the grand scheme of things. In fact, we're tiny, like the countless ants you crush under your feet as you walk around. Still, we try to extend beyond our reach. It's in our very nature, a deadly gift from our minds. Curiosity. It takes many shapes and forms. It can be the domino that started someone's addiction, the grim reaper of someone's death. For us, it is the shadow behind our misfortune. It led us to extend beyond our capabilities, into a realm in which our mind itself fractures. My team and I conduct investigations, experiments, and research into extremely secretive, or should I really just say sci-fi topics, at a highly reputable university in Australia. That's the most information I'm willing to give, in interest of my own privacy and safety. The existence of my team is never really supposed to be public either way, but as you'll realize at the end of my story, I desperately need to let everyone know. So we never really discovered anything amazing with our research and experiments, and mostly dropped topics and moved on. The goal wasn't to develop futuristic devices or work on sci-fi concepts, but to work into the unknown and extend our knowledge of the mysterious forces of the universe. That's how we stumbled upon the concept of time. I want you to try and define time. Hard, right? Time is a flow of events, passed through to the future. We're always stuck in the current moment, able to remember the irreversible past. But what causes time? Is it an illusion? Perhaps it's a force just like gravity. Experts say it's possible to travel to the future because of special relativity. But what about the past? I mean, the only way to travel to the future is still waiting. You can't just skip time. You'd simply perceive less time passing as compared to back down on Earth if you were to travel far away. So it isn't really time travel. You still have to wait. Our team really dug into the topic. We covered everything that was already known and went further in, conducting our own investigations and really conceptually analyzing time. Obviously, we found nothing spectacular, until one day we struck upon gold in an experiment. I won't complicate this post by explaining how we came to this discovery. It's going to be too scientific and boring in all honesty, so I'm going to simplify it. We discovered a sort of wave, not much different from, say, light, sound, or radio waves. It was just a wave, except it had one astonishing capability. I'll try to explain it with an analogy. Imagine time as timeline. Event 1 leads to Event 2, which leads to Event 3. Simple, right? Now I want you to think of each event as a slice of reality, a single window or dimension in which the current event is happening. It would mean the universe is divided into an infinite number of slices of time, each covering a single moment in time. Now imagine bringing those slices together into a nice bundled package. The wave we discovered can act like a metaphorical needle and be able to weave in and out through time, effectively time traveling constantly. It is not bound by the fabric of time and can travel beyond it or through it at will. Well, not really at will because the wave isn't alive. It must be governed by other laws and fields of physics that we as scientists haven't even begun to comprehend. We didn't waste too much time on that either. First, we needed to test our theory. It took several months to build a machine that could emit that type of wave. We named it the Tempus Wave, and so named the machine the Tempus. The machine used a combination of nuclear energy and radioactive elements to produce this wave and took up the space of a room. The funding came directly from a group of rich investors, who we had convinced by showing them our experiments with the wave. We made the machine and sent a little pulse exactly 1 week into the future. Further studies of these waves had allowed us to learn how to control their travel through time by adjusting their wavelengths and frequency. The Tempus waves are all around us. In fact, they completely saturate our reality. We just have never been able to detect them. Throughout this, we kept our investigation a secret. Nobody apart from our investors and us knew what we were doing. It was for a good cause too. We wanted to take credit for this ourselves before it was taken away by some shady government organization. After all, we did the heavy lifting. So the machine sent this pulse or signal 1 week into the future. We couldn't still accurately program the wave to arrive at an exact pinpoint moment in time, but we roughly estimated that it would skip 1 week forward in time. Then we set up a detection machine in the exact same room to be turned on 1 week into the future to try and catch the wave that we sent just now. It was a simple experiment, one that would prove once more to us that the Tempus Wave did indeed travel through time, and that we had effectively programmed it to travel to a certain point in time. After the 1 week, we turned on the sensing machine and waited for it to pick up the pulsing signal that we had sent a week ago. If it picked up the correct pattern, it would mean that we were onto something. We waited the whole day, and nothing came. Honestly, I was about to call it. We probably didn't program it correctly. Then, just as we were about to turn off the detecting machine and shut down the lab to go home, we heard a quick ding from our computers and realized that the detector had indeed caught the exact wave that we had sent 1 week ago. It was a groundbreaking moment for our whole team. I don't remember much of the rest of that day. We held a party in the laboratory and dreamed of how much money we'd make with our discovery, but most importantly, we decided we would not stop here. This was the furthest anyone in history had made it when it comes to time travel, and we weren't going public just yet. Until we achieved the holy grail of the time machine, we decided to keep on going. However, with that intention, we ran into even more headaches than before. If you've ever been into time travel, you'd know about all the paradoxes that it creates. If you travel back to the past and change something there that changes the course of time so the time machine was never invented, do you exist? Or what about meeting your past self in time? You might be wondering why we spent time working with these theoretical situations when we had already discovered a viable avenue of time travel. But the truth is, it was still close to impossible to utilize that Tempus Wave for actual time travel. The wave itself was unlike all matter and intangible with our technology. The fact that we were able to produce and detect it was already a 1 in 1,000-year miracle. And just like that, the months dragged on to years. People left the team and fresh minds joined the team, but we made no progress. Then one day, we made a completely accidental discovery. If you hear of the word quantum superposition, you'd immediately think of Schrödinger's cat, and that's a perfect explanation of what it is. A quantum particle can occupy multiple states at once, until it is observed, at which point it will assume a single state. Just like Schrödinger's cat, there exists a type of matter that simultaneously exists and doesn't exist at the same time. It's a bit hard to fathom, but what this essentially means is that all around us, there is a form of matter weaving in and out of existence and appearing and reappearing at different points of time. It perfectly follows the laws of quantum superposition, but breaks the laws of time along with it. It turns out this was the type of matter that was creating the Tempus Waves in the first place. This knowledge, as you'd guess, was about as useful as a blunt knife against a block of wood when it came to solving the time travel puzzle, as you'd guess. It'd still be months before we'd finally figure out a way to harness this matter and to get it to carry us with it through time. When the time travel machine was finished, I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach as I stared at its cold metal exterior. It was made of materials that had attracted the most tempest activity in our experiments and stood 3 meters tall and 3 meters wide. A metal room of darkness that held the promise of time travel inside. It was surreal, menacing, cold. We had played God for too long, and now the universe was going to make us pay for it. The first volunteers were promised $5,000 to travel forward in time. We distributed our ads secretly and didn't give much away on a website we had created. The idea was to draw out the most vulnerable volunteers, the ones who were so desperate for the $5,000 that they would go to an unknown location in the middle of nowhere that supposedly has a time travel machine. And that's exactly what we got. Most of them were depressed and aimless in life, living exclusively by themselves at the poverty line. We put them through the time machine one by one and sent them 1 week into the future. There was no way to track them after we had already sent them, so we could only sit there and wait anxiously. The anxiety rose to an all-time high when they did not return on the 7th day. No sign of them on the 8th day either. At that point, we were scrambling to search our records and the machine's files, trying to see if we had made some sort of error and hadn't accidentally sent them many years into the future of the past. One of them came back on the 9th day. He didn't look human. His eyes were wide and bloodshot, swollen to the point of bursting, and his lips had already burst, his mouth now a blood streak on his pale face. He didn't speak, simply appeared into the machine on the 9th day and stood stiff as a plank in the corner. We had a camera inside the machine and watched him for hours as he made no movement, seemingly just staring into space, until he finally collapsed and died. It took us a while to build the courage to extract him from the machine, and when we did, we found out that he had biologically aged 100 years. Then on the 10th day, he came back again, appearing into the machine and standing in the same corner we had dragged his corpse out from the other day. He stood until he collapsed and died again. This time we left his body in there, opting to see what would happen if he came back again the next day and saw his own dead body. On the 11th day, he came back, saw his body in the corner, and screamed. It shook our entire lab. It was the scream of 1,000 dying souls stabbing into our minds. But it was short-lived because he collapsed on his own body, and then we had 2 dead Schrodinger's cats in our lab. The rest of them never came back and were never found again. Instead, we worked even harder on the machine, trying to figure out what went wrong and refined it perpetually until we were sure something like that would not happen again. In fact, this time we didn't get any volunteers because I had decided I was going to go in. In the long years that I had worked on this secretive project, I had lost most of my social life. As I put more and more overtime into this project, I lost more and more friends and ended up more and more lonely. Apart from my colleagues at work, I truly had no one, and it didn't make sense to me to take advantage of some more vulnerable people again when I could just go ahead and test it myself. The cold exterior of the machine seemed to lick at my fear, but I knew I had to face what I had created, and so I walked inside. Just then, something very strange happened. I could swear that in a split second, I saw myself standing right in front of me, pale and disheveled just like the previous volunteer had been. In the moment, my doppelganger reached out to me and tried to touch me before he disappeared again. It happened so quickly and so suddenly that it could have very well been a small illusion, a trick that my mind was playing on me out of the anxiety I had. I pushed it to the back of my mind and stepped inside the machine, as the scientists sealed the doors behind me on the touch of a button and prepared to send me a week into the future. The countdown began, and when it reached 0, nothing happened. And then everything in the universe happened at once. It's impossible to describe. It's like I now existed outside time itself and was being thrown around from one time to another. Existing a split second here and a split second there, I had become nothing more than a giant quantum particle. I existed everywhere and nowhere at once. I'd like to reiterate that I didn't feel any physical pain, but my very neurons were burning in my brain from the overuse of them as I tried to process things we had never evolved to experience. My mind was reeling, and an immense never-ending migraine formed soon after. Still, the laws of superposition didn't let me die. I didn't age because I existed outside of time. I was only ever able to even be able to think when I would occasionally be thrown back in time. I don't know when, but at some point I was sent back inside that machine, and I saw myself trying to enter, and then just as I was about to warn myself to stop him, I left that moment and got thrown into another. That's when I finally realized what that hallucination had been. It seemed impossible to reverse it now, and I think that's what we really overlooked when designing the machine. We never even considered whether it'd be possible to turn a person back into a stable form of matter that will remain inside time. Regardless, I've found ways to ground myself for longer and longer. I don't think I'll ever be able to completely ground myself as I still sometimes lose control, but each time I've gotten closer and closer to typing up this story on a random laptop I found at some point in time. It seems like this is some convoluted destiny for me, because I somehow find myself back at this laptop in the utter randomness of it all, and I can type up my story. I'll probably stay stuck in this loop forever, suffering and broken, but this is a warning to everyone. Do not mess with time travel.